Welcome back, sailors. Great to see you. Thanks for joining. We had a weird chapter last episode. Not only was it very short, but it kind of seemed out of place. Ishmael lets us know that Bulkington has either died or is going to die, but doesn't really give us very much clarity on that. We don't get a whole lot in the way of advancing the plot either. We pretty much just get Bulkington dies, and it's better to die at sea than on land. Don't know if I agree with that. Dying at sea sounds, uncomfortable. But at any rate, our voyage is underway, and I'm eager to get into this next chapter, so let's do just that. Let's read a damn book. Chapter 24, The Advocate. As Queequeg and I are now fairly embarked in this business of whaling, and as this business of whaling has somehow come to be regarded among landsmen as a rather unpoetical and disreputable pursuit, therefore I am all anxiety to convince ye landsmen, of the injustice hereby done to us hunters of whales. Ishmael, you are one day at sea as a whaleman, and you're already speaking as if you have several voyages under your belt. But then again, you were already talking this way before you had even embarked, so why are we surprised? On we go. In the first place, it may be deemed almost superfluous to establish the fact that, among people at large, the business of whaling is not accounted on a level with what are called the liberal professions. Not much has changed there. I would imagine that if you're a whale hunter in 2025, you are not a liberal. If a stranger were introduced into any miscellaneous metropolitan society, it would but slightly advance the general opinion of his merits were he presented to the company as a harpooner, say, and if in emulation of the naval officers he should append the initials SWF, sperm whale fishery, to his visiting card. Such a procedure would be deemed preeminently presuming and ridiculous. Doubtless, one leading reason why the world declines honoring us whalemen is this. They think that at best, our vocation amounts to a butchering sort of business. I mean, are they wrong? And that when actively engaged therein, we are surrounded by all manner of defilements. Butchers we are, this is true. But butchers also, and butchers of the bloodiest badge, have been all martial commanders whom the world invariably delights to honor. And as for the manner of the alleged uncleanliness of our business, you shall soon be initiated into certain facts hitherto pretty generally unknown, and which, upon the whole, will triumphantly plant the sperm whale ship at least among the cleanliest things of this tidy earth. But even granting the charge in question to be true, what disordered slippery decks of a whale ship are comparable to the unspeakable carrion of those battlefields from which so many soldiers return to drink in all ladies' plaudits? And if the idea of peril so much enhances the popular conceit of the soldier's profession, let me assure ye that many a veteran who has freely marched up to a battery would quickly recoil at the apparition of a sperm whale's vast tail, fanning into eddies the air over his head. For what are the comprehensible terrors of man compared with the interlinked terrors and wonders of God? I don't know, Ishmael. I think that I would definitely rather take 30 minutes free diving with whales than 30 minutes in a battlefield. But, though the world scouts at us whale hunters, yet does it unwittingly pay us the profoundest homage, yea, and all abounding adoration. For almost all the tapers, lamps, and candles that burn round the globe burn as before so many shrines to our glory. But look at this matter in other lights. Weigh in all sorts of scales. See what we whalemen are and have been. Why did the Dutch in De Witt's time have admirals of their whaling fleets? Why did Louis XVI of France, at his own personal expense, fit out whaling ships from Dunkirk and politely invite to that town some score or two of families from our own island of Nantucket? Why did Britain, between the years 1750 and 1788, pay to her whalemen in bounties upwards of £1,000,000? And lastly, how comes it that we whalemen of America now outnumber all the rest of the banded whalemen in the world? Sail a navy of upwards of 700 vessels, manned by 18,000 men, yearly consuming $4 million, the ship's worth at the time of sailing $20 million, and every year importing into our harbors a well-reaped harvest of $7 million. How comes all this, if there be not something puissant in whaling? What does puissant mean? Don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Puissant.
Puissant? Gross. But it means having great power or influence. But this is not the half. Look again. I freely assert that the cosmopolite...
Cosmopolite.
God, the words are really throwing me in this chapter. I freely assert that the cosmopolite philosopher cannot, for his life, point out one single peaceful influence, which within the last 60 years has operated more potentially upon the whole broad world, taken in one aggregate, than the high and mighty business of whaling. One way and another it has begotten events so remarkable in themselves and so continuously momentous in their sequential issues that whaling may well be regarded as that Egyptian mother who bore offspring themselves pregnant from her womb. What the fuck? Okay, there's a note here. Melville slightly misstates. Nut in Egyptian mythology is the mother of Osiris and his twin sister Isis, not that Isis, whom he impregnated while in Nut's womb. Sounds like a Jerry Springer episode. So is Ishmael saying that the whaling industry has been responsible for events just as crazy as a god impregnating his sister while in the womb? I know, that's a tall bar to clear. It would be a hopeless, endless task to catalog all these things. Let a handful suffice. For many years past, the whale ship has been the pioneer in ferreting out the most remotest and least known parts of the earth. She has explored seas and archipelagos which had no chart, where no Cook or Vancouver had ever sailed. If American and European men of war now peacefully ride in once savage harbors, let them fire salutes to the honor and the glory of the whale ship, which originally showed them the way, and first interpreted between them and the savages. They may celebrate as they will the heroes of exploring expeditions, your Cooks, your Krusensterns, but I say that the scores of anonymous captains have sailed out of Nantucket that were as great and greater than your Cook and your Krusenstern. Who is Krusenstern? The first Russian circumnavigator of the globe. Okay. I don't know, I think impregnating your sister in utero is still more impressive. For in their succorless empty-handedness, they, in the heathenish sharked waters and by the beaches of unrecorded javelin islands, battled with virgin wonders and terrors that Cook, with all his marines and muskets, would not willingly have dared. All that is made such a flourish of in the old South Sea voyages. Those things were but the lifetime commonplaces of our heroic Nantucketers. Often adventures which Vancouver dedicates 3 chapters to, these men accounted unworthy of being set down in the ship's common log. Ah, the world! Oh, the world! Until the whale fishery rounded Cape Horn, no commerce but colonial, scarcely any intercourse but colonial, was carried on between Europe and the long line of the opulent Spanish provinces on the Pacific coast. It was the whalemen who first broke through the jealous policy of the Spanish crown, touching those colonies, and, if space permitted, it might be distinctly shown how from those whalemen at last eventuated the liberation of Peru, Chile, and Bolivia from the yoke of old Spain, and the establishment of the eternal democracy in those parts. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I'm not an expert on South American history, but I have to assume that Peruvians, Chileans, and Bolivians themselves had a greater deal to do with their own liberation than whalemen trading with them. And then it says here also that Melville knew that the independence won by Peru in 1824, Chile in 1828, and Bolivia in 1825 had not brought the untroubled establishment of eternal democracy, the contemporary catchphrase that Ishmael vehemently holds to in this passage. Okay, without getting too in the weeds here on South American history, that note seems to suggest a known flaw that Melville is giving Ishmael in his reasoning. If Melville himself knows that those liberation struggles did not lead to eternal democracy, but he has Ishmael say that they did, then what is Melville wanting us to think about our narrator? That perhaps despite all of his passion and knowledge, he's not always correct. But before we move on, I do see what Ishmael's saying about how commerce can lead to liberation or create the foundation for liberation struggles against repressive monarchies. And that these whaling ships, by trading with local populations in South America, might have loosened the grip that the Spanish monarchy had on these areas and planted seeds of revolution and independence. Again, I'm not a history expert, but I'm just trying to make sense of what Ishmael and Melville are giving us in this chapter. On we go. That great America on the other side of the sphere, Australia, was given to the enlightened world by the whalemen. After its first blunder-born discovery by a Dutchman, all other ships long shunned those shores as pestiferously barbarous, but the whale ship touched there. Okay, I've actually heard about this story. I think he's talking about the Batavia, which was a Dutch VOC merchant ship that suffered a shipwreck off the coast of Australia and then underwent a really barbarous and bloody mutiny while everyone was stranded on shore. And kind of a grim but funny detail about this is that I heard that the cabin boy, who was used by the mutineers to sometimes carry out executions himself, was eventually exiled to the Australian mainland and is considered by some to be the first European settler of Australia, which is quite a colonial forefather to have. Australia tracing their European lineage back to one particularly murderous child. Moreover, in the infancy of the first Australian settlement, the emigrants were several times saved from starvation by the benevolent biscuit of the whale ship, luckily dropping an anchor in their waters. The uncounted isles of all Polynesia confess the same truth and do commercial homage to the whale ship that cleared the way for the missionary and the merchant, and in many cases carried the primitive missionaries to their first destinations. If that double-bolted land Japan is ever to become hospitable, rude, it is the whale ship alone to whom the credit will be due, for already she is on the threshold. So this is interesting because within just a couple years after Moby Dick's publication, Commodore Perry, an American naval officer, would take a gunship to Japan in order to forcibly open Japan up to trade. But if in the face of all this you still declare that whaling has no aesthetically noble associations connected with it, then am I ready to shiver 50 lances with you there and unhorse you with a split helmet every time. God damn, Ishmael. The whale has no famous author, and whaling no famous chronicler, you will say. The whale no famous author, and whaling no famous chronicler. Who wrote the first account of our Leviathan? Who but mighty Job? And who composed the first narrative of a whaling voyage? Who but no less a prince than Alfred the Great, who with his own royal pen took down the words from Othere, the Norwegian whale hunter of those times, and who pronounced our glowing eulogy in Parliament? Who but Edmund Burke? True enough, but then whalemen themselves are poor devils. They have no good blood. in their veins. No good blood in their veins. They have something better than royal blood there. The grandmother of Benjamin Franklin was Mary Morell, afterwards by marriage Mary Folger, and one of the old settlers of Nantucket, and the ancestress to a long line of Folgers and harpooners, all kith and kin to noble Benjamin, this day darting the barbed iron from one side of the world to the other. Good again, but then all confess that somehow whaling is not respectable. So it seems like Ishmael for the rest of this chapter is kind of going into this fake argument between himself and a person who is not convinced of how freaking cool whaling is. Good again, but then all confess that somehow whaling is not respectable. Whaling not respectable? Whaling is imperial. By old English statutory law, the whale is declared a royal fish. Oh, that's only nominal. The whale himself has never figured in any grand imposing way. The whale never figured in any grand imposing way in one of the mighty triumphs given to a Roman general upon his entering the world's capital. The bones of a whale brought all the way from the Syrian coast were the most conspicuous object in the symboled procession. Granted, since you cite it, but say what you will, there is no real dignity in whaling. No dignity in whaling. The dignity of our calling the very heavens attest. Cetus is a constellation in the south no more. Drive down your hat in the presence of the Tsar and take it off to Queequeg. No more. I know a man that in his lifetime has taken 350 whales. I account that man more honorable than the great captain of antiquity, who boasted of taking as many walled towns. And as for me, if by any possibility there be any as yet undiscovered prime thing in me, if I shall ever deserve any real repute in that small but high-hushed world which I might not be unreasonably ambitious of, if hereafter I shall do anything that upon the whole a man might rather have done than to have left undone, if at my death my executors, or more properly my creditors, find any precious MSS in my desk, then here I prospectively ascribe all the honor and the glory to whaling, for a whale ship was my Yale College and my Harvard. Okay, Ishmael. That's the chapter, by the way. So Ishmael is as passionate as ever, but it seems like we're getting a little bit of a changing character from him. Maybe. It seems like now, instead of regarding this whaling voyage as his substitute for pistol and ball, I don't care what happens to me, I want to be dead anyway, I'm just going to go out to sea on a whaling voyage. Now it seems like he's thinking of it in some more grand terms, like there is something great for him to do in his life out on the ocean as a whaler. It's interesting that he calls whaling his Yale College and his Harvard, because if anything, he comes off as almost annoyingly educated already. But I guess that's to say that every lesson that he's already learned in his life pales in comparison to the greater life lessons that can be gained from this voyage that he is only one day into. It seems that Ishmael is making a grand case for the importance of whaling as its facilitation of imperialism and colonialism throughout the world, which, that's much more important to Americans and Europeans than it is to everyone else in the world. But regardless of our feelings about imperialism and colonialism, it can't be denied that there is a point to what Ishmael is saying, that whaling is driving the proliferation of Western values throughout the world, for better or for worse. I think the aspect of Ishmael's argument that I appreciate the most is the greater importance of workers in certain industries driving world events more than the heroes who get credit for them. Saying that your Captain Cooks of the world, for example, are less important than the anonymous whalers who paved the way for him. And at this point in history, whale oil is driving industrialization and American modernity, more so than crude oil extracted from the earth. Though crude oil from the earth would eclipse whale oil in popularity and importance in just a couple short years after this book comes out. But at any rate, I'm sure I've missed a couple things in this chapter, and if any stand out to you guys and you would like to share, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave a comment. And as always, like and subscribe, and I will see you next episode. Thank you so much for joining.